3 years ago, a Philadelphia police officer, 30 years old, was murdered in cold blood. This happened in March 2015. And today, only days ago, a far-left district attorney of Philadelphia, Robert Krasner, denied his memory and his family justice. I'm going to tell you about a story, and it's a story you might remember from, about 3 years ago, that has a very, very recent twist, and a terrible, terrible twist. Now, I don't know if you remember this. I certainly do. Excuse me, all too vividly, because it was the murder of a Philadelphia police officer, a young one. He was 30 years old, beloved by the other cops, exceptional police officer, exceptional guy. His name was Robert Wilson, and he was a member of the Philadelphia Police Department. And Officer Wilson, Robert Wilson III, was his. He was in a store buying a video game, a GameStop store for his son. Son had done well in school. This was back in March of 2015, a little over 3 years ago. And while Officer Wilson was in that GameStop store, two absolute savages, a guy named Ramon Wilson and Ramon Williams, and a guy named Carlton Hips, entered the store with the intention of robbing it. And what Officer Wilson did next gives me chills. He was in uniform, took a break to go buy his son a video game. His partner was outside. When he saw that these guys were going to start robbing this store at gunpoint, he realized they had turned their weapons to him, seeing him as a uniformed police officer. He could have sought cover, but to do that, he would have had to move past the civilians waiting in line, putting their lives in danger if these guys started shooting. So instead, went the other way. He exposed himself, came out from behind cover, and absorbed the gunfire. He fired back. He absorbed the gunfire so that civilians that he was paid to protect wouldn't have to. He literally gave his life for the people of Philadelphia. Literally. We use that as a platitude. Police officers and firemen go out there and they would give their lives, and they would. But Sergeant, he was promoted posthumously to Sergeant. Sergeant Robert Wilson did one of the most heroic, courageous things I've ever seen. I get chills, see my arms in the camera, telling this story and reminiscing with some of the Philly PD guys I know about this. This is one of the most heroic things I've ever seen anybody do. It absolutely is. Now, it just so happens he was a young black officer, and his killers were black men. They're being treated better than he is. And the facts of the case are, as I said, it was toward the end of the day, and Wilson just went into this GameStop store or 5 p.m. just to buy his son a video game. His son had done well in school. He wanted to buy him a game. He had two young sons. He had been on the job for 8 years, much like me. He came on to the job in his very, very early 20s. He had 8 years on the job. He was an experienced street cop, still a young guy at 30 years old. Engaged these two savages, threw their fire away from the innocents, and took a bullet to the head and died. Luckily, his partner was outside. He was able to exchange gunfire with the bad guys, and they were caught. But this entire story is very, very tragic. At the time, the police commissioner of Philadelphia, and Charles Ramsey, said, and I couldn't agree with Commissioner Ramsey more. This going 3 years ago. He said, quote, "When you look at the actions of the officer, I think he redefines what a hero is all about." We use that word hero a lot. They're a hero, they're a hero. Sometimes it's warranted, sometimes it isn't. It might be too weak of a word to describe what Sergeant Wilson did here. What he did. He stepped out into a clear area to draw gunfire away from a few feet. He knew he was taking those bullets. He knew that it was impossible for these guys to miss, but protecting those innocent people was more important to him. He knew what he signed up for. He knew what the job was about. He did it. The commissioner went on to say, one, he stepped away from the counter. There was civilians there, and the commissioner had watched the videos. I counted 4 behind the counter, a couple in line. He stepped away, so the shots weren't going directly at them, but instead were going toward him. It's a hard story for me to actually bring you. It's emotional. It just is. Wilson's partner, Damian Stevenson, I'm reading the fact pattern from a Daily News article. Back then, Wilson's partner, Damian Stevenson, encountered the suspects as they were fleeing the store, sparking yet another gunfight. His partner, Stevenson's shot Carlton Hipps in the leg. They were both caught. Now, Ramon Williams, one of the two savages, killed the cop, killed Sergeant Wilson, changed his clothes and went back into the store, tried to blend in as a customer. But by that point, the investigators, they had seen the video, they knew who he was, and they grabbed him at the scene. And, you hear so many stories about young black kids who don't have dads, or they are not doing well academically, they're just not on the right track. Here was a guy who had excelled in law enforcement, whose son was excelling in school, and he was buying him a video game. And he saved lives and took a bullet to the head. Apparently that doesn't matter. Didn't matter that he was a role model in the black community. Didn't matter that, I even hate saying that. His race shouldn't matter, but it does for this story. Because of the way the bad guys are being treated. Black lives don't matter when they wear blue. They certainly don't. At least not to far left Philly DA Larry Krasner. Well, a few days ago, now, the fact pattern of the case as I gave it to you is exactly the fact pattern of the case. I didn't add anything for drama. I didn't add any hyperbole. I didn't exaggerate the details. I didn't try to make it seem worse than it was to make my point. Research it. Sergeant Robert Wilson, GameStop. Sergeant Robert Wilson, murdered, Philadelphia. Go out there, do a web search, read the case yourself. You'll see that I gave you the details antiseptically exactly as they happened. Yeah, he was that heroic. This murder was that cold-blooded. Well, a couple of days ago, Friday or Saturday, actually, maybe Thursday, far left, radical, Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner, not even against the wishes of Sergeant Wilson's family. He never even consulted with them. In fact, the family says he's treated them like dirt. He cut a deal with the killers. Sergeant Wilson's family's infuriated. This from an NBC affiliate in Philadelphia. Let me read you this. And bear with me, because the story is an emotional story. Whenever a cop is killed, I had to respond to those. Tough, The family of slain Philadelphia Police Sergeant Robert Wilson III got a call from the district attorney's office late Friday. This just happened. This happened on Friday, 4 or 5 days ago. Late Friday, telling them that the men implicated in his murder will not stand trial or face the death penalty. Law enforcement sources are saying that Larry Krasner's office is allowing Ramon Williams and Carlton Hipps, these savage, cold-blooded murderers, to accept between 50 life sentences plus 50 to 100 years in prison in exchange for guilty pleas. Number one, they should get the death penalty. Number two, what this now allows is years upon years of appeals and the chance that a far-left parole board will let them out of prison. Hipps and Williams will formally accept the deal at Philadelphia's Criminal Justice Center. And that apparently happened yesterday morning. The deal was cut. I haven't seen any news, anything to indicate it wasn't. And I actually waited until today to do the story because I was hoping at the 11th hour the pleas of the family would have mattered. That maybe the district attorney in Philadelphia, Larry Krasner, would have had a common sense change of heart, but he didn't. And when I checked in with some sources in Philly PD yesterday, they told me the deal went through. The DA's office communications director, last comment from them was they had no pending comment. The plea did not go over well with Sergeant Wilson's family. They feel justice isn't being served. His sister, Shakira Wilson Burroughs, said she was speechless when she got the call from the district attorney's office. She simply said, they failed my brother. And she was right. Actually, Miss Wilson Burroughs is far more dignified than I would have been. Far more dignified than I would have been. She's a class act. I certainly wouldn't have been that polite. Krasner is a terrible, terrible far left guy. And many families who were the victims of murder, they lost somebody, feel that Krasner, I'm going to tell you all about Krasner and who backs him. And then in a little bit, I'm going to bring on Ben Manish. You've seen Ben. He's a former local and federal law enforcement officer, lives in Philadelphia, does a lot with law enforcement, a lot with politics. He actually was senior campaign staff of the Republican who ran against Larry Krasner for district attorney, but unfortunately lost. So Ben has some very deep insights into the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, which is really a story of national, essentially international impact. Because in just a second, I'm going to tell you who funded the Philly District Attorney and why. But Krasner has pledged never to seek the death penalty for murders. Now, Shakira Wilson Burroughs, Sergeant Wilson's sister, said she was told the committee to determine the appropriate sentence in this case convened for 2 hours last week, but their family, the Wilson family, she's a Burroughs, she's married, family was never asked to even comment. They knew nothing about this. They were never called. They were never consulted. He said, quote, "No one even got a statement from us to even present. Everything is hush-hush. It feels as though the district attorney's hand is covering their mouth." Now, the Fraternal Order of Police president, John McNesby, he said, "This is a message to Philadelphia police officers. Be careful. You don't have the support from the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office." And Sergeant Wilson's grandmother, and I've seen the family in press conferences, is a good people. It's a good family. They had all the evidence for Robbie's trial. They had the gun. They had the murderers. They had the surveillance tapes. They had the store where they went in and killed him. All this they had. They were ready to go to trial no sooner than Krasner gets into office and things back up. Why? That's plain police officer now posthumously promoted to Sergeant Robert Wilson's grandmother. And he's 100% right. Connie Wilson is her name, his paternal grandmother on his death. And Mrs. Wilson is 150% correct. Both women, Wilson's sister, Shakira Wilson Burroughs, and his grandmother, Connie Wilson, they had called for Krasner to step aside in this case. They knew he was rabidly far left. They knew he was going to go soft on crime. And see, this case is less about politics. This is an African-American family from Philadelphia. This is not a white family from the Deep South. And even they could see that this district attorney was way too soft on crime because their son, their grandson, their brother, a police officer, was murdered. And 3 years later, his family waited 3 years and 3 months for justice in this case. 3 years and 3 months. He was gunned down early March of 2015, and this case resolved in June 2018. 3 years and 3 months. They didn't get it. They didn't get it. Terrible. Absolutely terrible. Well, who is Larry Krasner? You know who funded Larry Krasner's run for DA? And Ben Manish, when he joins me in a bit, is going to be able to tell us so much more. Larry Krasner's run for district attorney was funded by George Soros. $2 million in contributions from various PACs, family members, associates, and hard money from George Soros. And when he was elected, when Krasner was elected, and this is a story from the Free Beacon from back in January of this year, when Krasner took office. Democrat Larry Krasner, Philadelphia's new district attorney, who was backed almost exclusively by nearly $2 million in contributions from liberal billionaire George Soros, has purged more than 30 prosecutors from the district attorney's office within days of taking over the position. Krasner, who was sworn in on January 2nd, asked 31 prosecutors to resign on his 4th day on the job and has given no explanation for the requests. A list of those who were purged from the office shows that a number of them came from the Homicide Division drug enforcement, and civil asset forfeiture units. These terminations have stalled cases, where one judge on Monday criticized the office after they asked a murder trial be postponed due to the assistant attorney general being one of the dozens of people let go by Krasner. Incredible. Now, Krasner, before he was elected, was a far, far left defense lawyer. Rapidly far left. Bad. I mean, made the ACLU and the Southern Poverty Law Center look conservative. He resented groups like Occupy Wall Street and Black Lives Matter. He had sued the police department more than 75 times and joked that he had built a career that made him completely unelectable. He hates the police, and now he runs it. This is really just terrible. Now, Beth Grossman was his Republican challenger, his Republican opponent. That's who our friend Ben Maness worked for. Ben's going to tell us all about this race when he joins me in just a few minutes. But Beth Grossman at the time told the Free Beacon, quote, "I have concerns. If he gets elected, my opponent, I don't want us to turn into a Baltimore. I don't want us to turn into a Chicago. It's really disturbing. We have one of the finest public defender's offices in the country. We don't need two." In other words, saying that if he becomes the district attorney, he would turn the DA's office into a safe haven that coddled and protected criminals. But he beat her in the election for district attorney by more than 40%. When I say he runs the police department, well, the commissioner and the mayor really run the police department. But if the district attorney's office isn't going to prosecute cases, then the police aren't going to arrest for those cases. So the district attorney has a lot of influence over how police. A tremendous amount in a city like Philly where it's an elected DA. Yeah. Now, Soros is pumping money into DA's races around the country. He wants civil unrest in this country. He wants things like no cash bail, light sentences for violent offenders. George Soros is an arbitrage guy. He makes money when the U.S. is destabilized and the dollar's weak. This is a terrible, sinister man. Terrible guy. And he's pumping money into DA races in Florida, Ohio, Illinois, Texas, Louisiana, New Mexico, and Mississippi, among others. Florida and Ohio, the two most significant swing states in the U.S., and Pennsylvania, the third, where he pumped money into its largest city's DA race. Soros has a plan to destabilize the swing states, to get felons out of prison and give them restore their rights to vote. He wants this country blue. He wants civil unrest in the U.S. We're going to do a whole segment on that. But this case is about the lack of justice for the family of Sergeant Robert Wilson. They waited 3 years and 3 months. They got no justice. I'm going to bring on Ben Maness in a little bit. Like I said, he's going to tell us all about Krasner. He's going to tell us all about what he's done to the city and how and why he won being so far left, hating good working people, good decent people, and loving and coddling thugs and criminals. I'll tell you one thing. Family of Sergeant Robert Wilson deserved better. Memory of Sergeant Robert Wilson deserved better. The men and women of the Philadelphia Police Department, his brothers and sisters, deserve better. And Sergeant Robert Wilson, he deserved justice. He deserved much better. This is a very important story. I want to bring you more like this every day. Critically important. Help me do that by subscribing to our premium service at www.therebel.media/shows. Please go to your app store, download the Rebel app. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.